It's live now, is it? Is it live? Okay, good. Right, hello everybody. Thank you very much for coming. I hope I can promise you an afternoon of erudition, information and entertainment, or at least one of those three. You pick which one. My name is Rob Briggs. I'm the co-owner and co-founder and director of Greystone Gallery. My lovely assistant, who is behind the camera phone there, is Leslie, also my wife. And Leslie's also co-founder, director, etc. Leslie runs the front end of the gallery, I run the back end of the gallery. That's kind of how it works. We are very privileged today to have two of our wonderful artists with us, Kerry Souter and Catherine Sargeant. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
We're going to have a short discussion. So initially I'm going to start with talking with Kerry about her life and her work, and then we'll have a little bit of opportunity for Q&A. We'll swap over to Catherine, do the same sort of thing. At any one time, if you want to stick your hand up and ask a question, please do so. This is really, really informal. It's not meant to be too much of a challenge for anybody. We want you all to enjoy yourselves and hope learn a little bit more about the artists, the work they do, and what that means, I guess, to you and to the rest of us. So we are live streaming on Instagram Live. Hello, everybody. Do not worry, the camera is not on you guys, it's on us. And so I couldn't be more pleased to welcome both Kerry and Catherine, as I say. And Kerry, perhaps if I could do a little bit of an introduction to yourself, and then maybe you could talk a little bit more about your life and your work.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So Kerry Souter is a Scottish abstract artist. You can see a lot of her works around the walls in our latest exhibition, Time and Tide. She works predominantly in acrylic paint and mixed media, creating intuitive, ethereal and multi-layered artworks with a strong focus on texture and collage. Her work is an emotional response to her exploration of the rich textures and organic patterns found in the coastal landscapes of Scotland. She was born in 1970 in Dundee in Scotland. We're exactly the same age, only I was born elsewhere. And she studied at Gray's School of Art in Aberdeen, where you received a BA Hons in textile design in '92. Her textile background took her career in many directions over the years before she began painting and exhibiting professionally in 2020. So Kerry lives in Ayr. She's got representation with several UK galleries, and her work can be found in private collections around the UK and abroad. So Kerry, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
Yes, well, as you said, I've got a textile background. I did textile design at Gray's in Aberdeen, and following that, I took on various pieces of work. I was quite interested in fashion design, and I did wedding dressmaking and designing for a while. And then I got into felt making and felt art, and I was a felt artist for about 15 years before eventually finding that I was being drawn back to painting, mainly because I felt the felt making was slightly restrictive in the techniques and the colour palette, and so I'd been thinking about painting a lot, and then in 2020 with lockdown and everything was changing, and that's when I decided to make the shift. And so since then I've been painting professionally and yes, exhibiting with galleries around Scotland and the UK.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit more about what attracts you to your subject matter. So when did you, tell a little bit more about that, and when you decided that, hey, this is the kind of area I want to go into for subject matter?
I think the subject matter has always been the same. It's always been places around me or things that stir up memories as well. It's not always necessarily places, but I think living in Scotland and living on the coast, I grew up on the east coast, and I now live on the west coast in Ayr, and so that the coast and the beach and the shoreline has always been part of my life and where I like to spend time, and so that's been the biggest influence in my work. And when I was a textile artist as well. It's just sort of gone in a slightly different direction with the paint. But yeah, it's generally, you know, it's harks back to childhood memories as well of going on holidays and to, you know, around the coastline, but also, you know, to Glencoe and things. I think there's just such an atmosphere around these places, and that's what attracts me. Kind of the mood and the atmosphere of the place that I'm trying to express in the painting.
That's great, thank you. And when you made the shift from felt-based art to painting, more pure painting with a bit of mixed media in there, what was the genesis of that? Because I think that this happened at a specific time, didn't it?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I'd been thinking about it for a long time. It's just felt making. I don't know if anyone knows much about the process, but it was wet felting that I was doing, and so the part of the process is to wet the felt and roll it, and that shrinks the fibres. And so you can, I was using lots of mixed fibres and all sorts of bits and pieces, and then when it shrinks, the finished product is quite textured and tactile. But there's not that much control in the finished product. You know, you can only control it to a certain amount. And I like that in both senses. I like the lack of control, but also sometimes it was resulting in a bit of disappointment. And also the colours that I could use were restricted. And my colour palettes do tend to focus on the more sort of muted, natural colours found in nature, but I think I just wanted just a bit more input and control into what I was doing, and just to experiment more. My work is really based around experimentation and trying different things, trying different media. So yeah, I just felt like it was just a natural progression that I just wanted to try something new, and the experience of lockdown, where everyone was suddenly, there were all these things going on online and all these art courses, free courses. Everybody seemed to be moving in that direction, and so yeah, I had painted in the past, and so took some free courses, and I just got into, and really rapidly just got way back into it and loved it, and took off from there.
What I'd like you to do now is just to follow through on that thought into our current show that we've got on at this point in time. So in terms of both developing the colour palette for this show and some of the expressive nature on it, because I think as you'll be able to see, ladies and gentlemen, if you look round the gallery, there's a lot of kinetic action in this particular suite of paintings that Kerry's done.
Well, this was, I had a show with your gallery last year, and I think that the difference between that one and this one is that my palette has become more focused, I think, on a particular mood, and what I was trying to represent here was the colours that I found along a shoreline, and looking in detail at that shoreline on the, with the seaweed and the rocks and the pebbles and the amazing range of colour that you can find. And so that was what sort of prompted my colour palette, and then also the textures and the contrasts in those textures, the rough against the smooth, and the silkiness of the seaweed against the grains of the shingle, because the texture of them is really important to me as well. I think from my textile background, I am really drawn to more textural things. So yeah, it's colour and texture, I think, are the main ingredients for my work, and just trying to, these were all, I don't focus on usually on a particular place. I don't have place in mind as such. I tend to gather information from various sites, but these, I would say, were more focused on one area on the west coast of Scotland, and a collection. I was trying to keep it more sort of within that theme of that particular area and that particular visit that I had. And I'll take photographs and things, and I'll make notes, and I go to visit places of, how it's making me feel at the time, and the weather as well can be really influential on the mood of a place. So, yeah.
So, if you were to pick any of your paintings that are on display here, perhaps one that you can see from this position, apologies if you have to turn around, it's probably the who's your favourite child question. Out of these, which would be one of your favourites out of this collection that you've got here?
I think I like them for different reasons. There's this square one here that I think I did an Instagram post on it, because that was the problem child. That was the one that it came so close so many times, and then it kept changing direction, because I do work very intuitively. I don't have a set plan at the beginning of a painting, so I like to just create lots of texture and colour and then respond to that, and that determines the outcome of the painting. So that one I'm fond of now, because we've been through a lot together. But I feel this one here, which is unusual for me, because I tend not to work in the sort of portrait shape, but this one for me, I felt summed up what I was trying to say about the place and the feelings that I had, and just that sort of, it had all the textures and the colours that I wanted in it, but it also had that kind of dreaminess that, it's what's going on in my head at the time. It's the sort of mood that I'm feeling at the time of viewing my environment. So, yeah, I think this one, and the two next to it as well, would be amongst my favourites.
Okay, thank you. And when you're thinking about the composition, as you say, you react to how it organically develops for you. Mm-hmm. At what stage do you then consider titling the pieces?
Well, it depends. Sometimes the titles come up while I'm doing them, and it can be, maybe music that I'm listening to will inspire me on a particular day. But often I do title them afterwards, and sometimes I need a bit of space away from them and then look at them again. Like for this group of work, some were finished months ahead of the time, so going back to them again with fresh eyes was quite interesting, and to also see how I work in quite a small studio, so I can't keep all the work together and view it all at the same time. But it was interesting when I brought the work all out together again, that I felt I did have a theme running throughout it. But yeah, as far as titles go, sometimes they spring to mind while I'm working on them, and sometimes they take a bit of thinking about afterwards.
Okay, thank you. So, as I said before, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions during the conversation, please just shout out or stick your hand up. There's no airs and graces here. So you mentioned a little bit about influence there, Kerry, so I want to pick you up on that in a couple of areas. Firstly, I'd like to talk about art, and then I'd like to talk about other types of media. You also mentioned music. So if we're thinking about art and your own process of development as an artist, who inspired you or who influenced you that we could talk about?
Well, recently there was a bit of a turning point in 2020, and I discovered an artist online, Alice Sheridan, and who runs a membership for artists as well. She's an artist based in London, and I loved what she was talking about with her work, and I love her work. I love her use of colour. It's so sophisticated, and I just really, it felt so fresh to me that it really inspired me to think, oh, this is what I want, this is the kind of work I want to be producing. So yeah, she was a big influence, and also David Mankin, who's based down in Cornwall. I love his the movement, and they're just really reactive, his paintings, and I feel like they just speak of his environment as well. You can tell immediately by looking at them. I also was inspired by him because he's quite new to painting as well, and hadn't been doing it for very long, so that it was good to hear of that. But I'm inspired by lots of other types of art as well. Lots of textile artists, obviously, because of my background. Debbie Liddon, I love her work. It's very, she likes to experiment with lots of sort of non-traditional media, and her approach to it. She has a course called, I think it was called Sense of Place, and so she likes to look at the entire environment and what she sees and what she hears and what she can touch, and that really appealed to me as well. So I like to think about that when I don't gather that information, as she's very organised in the way she gathers it, whereas I'm not organised. But that's what I like to be thinking about, and taking notes in the environment when noticing things like that. Yes, and lots of ceramicists as well. And I've forgotten the name of the ceramicist that I was going to mention, Craig Underhill. I really like his work. It's very tactile. It's influenced by not just the coast but the landscape, and I feel that you can really see those influences and the marks, but in a very abstract way.
Okay, and that's from an artistic perspective. What about from a musical perspective? Because you mentioned about sometimes titles coming to you, for instance, when you're listening to a piece of music. So perhaps maybe you could tell us a little bit about one of your favourite groups or favourite artists musically, and then how that music or another piece might actually inspire some of your creativity.
It's more, I'm middle-aged. I like to go back to what's comfortable. I like the music that I remember from my childhood and teenage years and early 20s. So, 70s, 80s, 90s music. I like listening to all of it, and I listen to all sorts of music. I kind of like a bit heavy metal, AC/DC, and I know you're fans. But anything really that just creates a good atmosphere in the studio. I think it's, I don't work well if my mind is preoccupied and I'm, in a rush, or I'm worried about something. So it's just trying to create a good atmosphere for painting. Find that, if I'm enjoying myself and enjoying some good music, then that really helps.
Could you give us, I'm curious, but like I said before, we're similar age. I like probably the same sort of music as you do. So could you give me a particular track? Maybe it's an AC/DC one, maybe it's were you a Duran or a Whammy?
I was more of a Whammy, yeah. Okay. But I really appreciate Duran Duran now. It's funny, it's just what reminds you of things, even though I wasn't a big fan of theirs at the time. But yeah, I loved Van Halen and AC/DC and Aerosmith, but I also like lots of pop music as well. So yeah, a broad mix, and I like folk music as well. I used to, still can play the guitar, but I used to play the guitar a bit, and so I played a lot of folk music. So just anything, in all the usual Beatles and Rolling Stones as well. Just a a good mix.
Excellent. So, turning back to art and music, what advice would you give to any aspiring artists that are in the audience?
Oh, well, I think to just do it and to not be afraid to do it. I think that it was reaching a certain age and a certain time as well. And like I mentioned, during COVID, it made everyone concentrate a bit more on what was going on in their life and how they wanted to continue. And I think it's important to just to do, it's so important, what I've realised, it's so important to do what makes you happy, because you'll do it well, because you're passionate about it. And so for young people, there's lots of I felt, going into art and having a career in art was just so unreachable, that I had to do something a bit more sort of a normal job. But I just don't believe that that's the case. And I think nowadays there's much more support for artists and for art. And so I'd say just, really go for it and really tune into what makes you tick and what you're passionate about. And if you follow in that direction, you'll be all right, because you'll work hard at it.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Have we got any questions from the audience, please? Yes.
Favourite painting tool? Yeah, I suppose I do. I like what are they called? These sort of wedges, these silicone wedges, and you can get handheld ones as well. And I like them because they smooth out the paint, and then you get an unexpected sort of accidental mark made from it. I like accidental marks, and I suppose I'm trying to make everything look like it was just kind of thrown on it and a bit accidental, but I am manipulating it in quite a controlled way. In the later stages, in the early stages, but there's lots of layers, and so the early layers are very sort of rough and not particularly attractive at all, but they're important so that later on in the painting, in the later layers, because I draw back into the paint and I scrape paint away, and so you'll get colours and textures coming from underneath, and that's when the exciting things happen, because things happen by accident and that you can't predict.
Thank you for that. Any other? Yes, sir, at the back there.
Being an East Coast girl, moved to the West,
Mm.
you the opinions on things like
Well, I wasn't really painting very much, apart from, I was only on the East Coast until I was I was a student and at school, and I don't do a lot of, I don't paint plein air or anything like that, so I'm not often outside when I'm painting, but yeah, I would say that there is a difference, definitely. I always feel that the East Coast is a bit more raw, looking out to the North Sea feels a bit more energised on the course. It's a bit more, a bit wilder. I think it's a bit warmer and milder on the West Coast generally. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
You mentioned fashion.
Mm.
What extent do you feel as formative in terms of career? What extent has impacted your career? Knowing that you're at different stages.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially it seems not very connected, but I'm gradually realising that there were similarities in what I was interested in then. For example, the wedding dresses and creating, I was very interested in the embroidery and the beading and the decoration of it, and I think that's still in the sense that I'm interested in the textures and, you know, the tactile nature of paint and the different, you know, surfaces that I have. So it's similar in, you know, I get excited about those things in a similar way. You know, a beautiful fabric that has lots of texture on it, I get really, really excited about that in the same way that, you know, a rock on the beach with lots of moss and barnacles and stuff, I get excited about that as well. So, yes, and I think, I'm not sure that, you know, it was a very different teaching doing design at art school rather than fine art, and I, you know, sometimes I do wish that, you know, maybe I wonder how things would have been different if I'd done fine art at art school, but you just have to go forward and with what you've got, and it's definitely influenced me in many ways, and, you know, and this is the result so far, and who knows how it's going to progress, and that's the thing. I think I'm always looking to develop it, and so one group of paintings sort of is the starting point for the next group, and you know, things that I'll have picked up and learned and discovered in one set of paintings, I'll want to explore that in the next set, so it just one leads on to the next.
Great, thank you. Yes, sir. Sorry, were you about to ask a question? No? Yes. Yes. Yeah. No? Okay, no problem at all. Any other questions, please? Okay, no? Okay, thanks very much for that, Kerry. And Catherine, perhaps if I could turn to yourself now. So we have with us as well Welsh-born multidisciplinary artist Catherine Sargeant, who's based here in Scotland. And she works broadly across painting, printmaking and installation, often using text in her artworks, creating unique paintings using a variety of media. She graduated as a mature student from Edinburgh College of Art in 2007, when she became the first recipient of the WASP's New Graduate Award, giving her a studio space in Patriot Hall, Edinburgh, where she continues to work. And if anybody doesn't know where Patriot Hall is, it's there, just next to us. So it's great to see you here, Catherine, as well. She now divides her time between the studios in Patriot Hall and a small croft on the edge of a sea loch in Westeros. That sounds great, doesn't it? Along with her art practice, she's also a freelance art educator, and she's exhibited widely and has worked in several international institutions and has won a number of awards. So quite an illustrious career so far. Catherine, thank you. Perhaps you'd like to tell us a little bit more about yourself, your life and your career.
Okay. Well, I've come with a little slideshow. If we could maybe pop that on. Thank you for coming in this afternoon. It's nice to see people, and thank you very much to Leslie and Rob for inviting me to be part of this show alongside Kerry. And it's amazing, Kerry and I have only just met, but we're both brought up on the East Coast, and we now both do a lot of work on the West Coast. So there we go. I started as a young child. That cutesy little picture that my dad took at his easel. So my dad has always painted. It wasn't his career, but there was always paints in the house, and I was the youngest of 4 children, and I was the one that enjoyed making art. As much as my dad wanted all 4 of us to, I was the only one that took it forward. So if we move on. So I then went to college, Edinburgh College of Art, as a mature student, and I became known for my text art, and I very much purely used words, to the point where I would type them up on a typewriter and then maybe build them up into bigger screen prints. When I left college, I started doing some teaching in at least School of Art and other places. And during that teaching, I would often be teaching very broad painting and drawing techniques. And if we move on to the next one, I'm going to skip forward, because in 2020, you know, that famous year, when things were changing. I was really wanting to paint far more than just purely use words, and I was starting to introduce a lot more paint, partially because I was teaching students painting skills, and quite honestly I was quite jealous of them spending the whole day painting and I wasn't getting to. But what happened in 2020, I was locked out of my studio next door. We weren't allowed in. We were locked out of the printmaker's studio, and I like to tell that I'll get the violins out for the next bit of the story. I was staying with my partner Tom, who lives in a lovely attic flat, and but with a little Velux window. So I had a little corner of a room with a little Velux window. It was very much the artist in the garret. And I started to paint the sky, just watching the sky and painting it, for no other reason than painting it for myself. And so this was every day in April 2020. I painted the sky, first of all in a big sketchbook, and then I turned them into little small paintings. And if we go on to the next one, and you'll see on each painting that there is the date, and there is a time there, which is the time I looked out that window, which was very nicely framing the sky for me. So I had to paint quite quickly, and then the words that were on, they were words that I literally just wrote on the page at the time, something to do with the day. You know, I think my mother's birthday is in April, so happy was on on her day. So that became a series of works for the whole of April. After that, if we move on to the next one, I did something called the 100-Day Project. I heard about it, some of you may have heard about it, where you choose to do something creative, and it doesn't need to be painting. Dancers do it, musicians do it, and you're repeating that creative thing daily for 100 days. So I rather foolishly decided to create a collage each day of the sky, and I did that and I wanted to keep it all contained in one book. And I haven't got that's not this book, because it's ready to fall apart. So I chose a book and I created a collage each day, but at the same time I left some of the words exposed on the page so that there would be a little erasure poem. And from those pages, and this photograph shows it, I have created a number of paintings. So that's actually quite a large painting on the wall behind the book. So that's almost an ongoing thing, because I haven't done 100 paintings from those 100 days. So there's still more to come. So that was the first series, the April skies, and then I did the 100-Day Project. And then I decided that actually doing a collage a day is really hard work. It's really time consuming, and we were no longer in lockdown, and I couldn't commit that time. So I thought I'll paint in a book. So I bought myself another book, and this is it. And I started doing the sky. And if we move on to the next one, you can see I also was allowed back up to my little croft studio. And Rob, yes, it is lovely, and you can all be jealous, but I want you to know that it is electricity free, and it's quite rustic. But I literally just look out the window, and that was me painting this book. So I was not only starting to paint the sky, I was painting the sea loch in front of me. And if we move on to the next one, this is 2 pages of the book, and that's just 1 hour apart, because as we all know in Scotland, the weather changes, the colours change, the tones change, you know, what you're looking at, it's a constant change. So from the sky to the sky and the sea, then we moved on to the sea alone, and I can't remember my next slide. Oh yeah, sorry, just to say that then that became a series of 28 miniature paintings. And then if we move on to the next one, that's a little side view of them. So I started doing this round format, and that was very much because not only when I'm up at the croft or painting, I'm often sitting there with binoculars looking out to see if there's any movement in the sea, and also a sort of a link to ships' portholes, and raindrops. And I just fancied trying the round format, and I enjoyed it. So from that, it moved on to my next series, which is what Rob and Leslie have are very kindly showing a selection of, my sea circles. And if you move on to the next one. So last December, if any of you went to the Society of Scottish Artists annual exhibition, I had 67 of these circles up on the wall, and that's a lovely picture of me wearing my grandmother's apron, which was acting as a tool belt, because on day one I was up and down that ladder like nobody's business, and I thought I have to have, I'd run out of pockets, and the only thing I could find at home to contain things was this old apron. So the words on, so I put a question out to people, and I asked lots of people, and the question was very simple: when you're watching the sea, what words come to mind? So I collected lots of words, and then I individually put a single word on each piece, and it's organically hung so that it can completely change shape wherever it goes. That was a sort of a nod to Hokusai's wave. It actually had to be reversed. There's a long story behind that. And so back at the back of the gallery, there's a number of them, and they're all in different sizes, just to give that indication of the different water droplets. And these works are on different surfaces, a mixture of plywood and aluminium, for the different surfaces to give different effects. So that's a quick, brief run through of my work to recent days, and now I feel I'm going to get some questions from Rob.
Thanks very much for that. Right, let me just shift this back. That's a really good run through. Thank you, Catherine. So yes, some questions. All right, this is supposed to be a conversation. So again, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to jump in at any time, please do so. So I just want to take you mentioned this a little bit, but I want to take you back to your childhood and your first experiences of art. So when did you first discover that you had a passion or a talent for art?
Well, I always used to like going to my dad's studio, which was up in the loft, and just dabbling, and he tended to do watercolours, so I would have a little go at his watercolours, but I always enjoyed drawing. I always wanted to make things, and my mum was a fantastic dressmaker, so it was like I just had to constantly be creating things, and I used to love getting those little kits as a children. A candle making kit really excited me at Christmas time, and just, even paint by numbers was a good fun thing to get. That it's just always been there, and even before I went to art college, I was always, I used to do a lot of dressmaking myself, and then I would, just try various different night classes. I was always dabbling in making things, but never really concentrating on making things. That came later.
Mm-hmm. So can you draw a line for us perhaps between your initial forays into making things per se, into where you've got to today? I appreciate that might be a little bit of a longer question, but how did you go from starting off with the candle making, the painting by numbers, to actually discovering you had more of a talent for this, and this was something you could build into more learning and potentially a career?
Well, I suppose at school there was a slight consideration of art college, but it was never ever discussed, and I didn't have the confidence or the belief in myself that I could go to art college. But I can't blame anybody, because I didn't really discuss it with anybody. So I didn't go down that route. And it wasn't until the millennium that it was a chance conversation with somebody who knew that I enjoyed making things, who said, oh, have you heard Edinburgh College of Art is doing a part-time degree? And it literally was like a light bulb moment. But it was like, well, I've done a degree. I could probably, it just made me think, oh, maybe I could go to art college now after all. And then I actually pursued building a portfolio and getting into Edinburgh College of Art, which was quite a long process to do that. And then I graduated during Edinburgh College of Art centenary year, so I call it my millennium epiphany to my centenary celebration.
Thank you. So when you were putting that portfolio together, so I'm just going to dig in a little deeper because it's interesting. When you're putting that portfolio together, how did you feel and how did you determine what your topics and media were going to be?
Well, I think there was, I was going to both Edinburgh College of Art and Leith School of Artists night classes, and the tutors there were, advising. There was a lot of life drawing, and it was a fairly standard style portfolio. In a sense, it was more the subject matter they were set in rather than at that point me choosing. It was. Yeah, I would say it was a fairly standard. You had to prove that you could do life drawing, that you could do your colour mixing and understand the language of art.
Okay, thank you. So, again, just going back a little bit, if you think about all the different experiences you've had throughout your life, can you tell us maybe about one or two seminal moments where you've gone, that's something that I want to express?
I think about 13 years ago I started spending time up on the west coast, and just that whole watching the water and watching the sky, and although I was making art a lot with words and not so much with painting, I really had a desire to get back into painting. Initially I painted, did a lot with the woods, because there's woods behind there, and even the tools, axes and saws, and it was just trying to get a sense of my surroundings, where I was. So I think that experience of spending time there has been very, very important to me. When I make art, I tend to get very absorbed in something. I make a decision on, and that decision, it's not that I make the decision, something will happen and it'll be like, right, that's what I'm going to do now. And then I'll focus on it and I'll create a series of works. So I'll maybe do, a number of sketches, maybe like this book that I've shown you. And then from these, I'll take elements of them to make specific paintings that can be displayed on people's walls and in galleries, and either as individual pieces or as installation pieces that can work as a whole or can be split and work also singular.
I'd like to pick you up on just part of that at the end of your answer there, which is around installation. And so you say that some installations, maybe that they're a whole, or there may be component parts that could be displayed or sold separately. Just thinking about it, when you're so you kind of got two elements here. You've got the paintings themselves, or the works themselves, and then you've got the positioning and the installation. And you mentioned that at the SSA show, the RSA, so Royal Society of Arts and Architecture, I think it's called. Where did you come up with the idea of how to blend your round discs that have watery themes with the wave? I guess it's probably a straightforward answer, but tell us a little bit about that, and perhaps one other installation you've done and how you came to determine why the pieces needed to be displayed in a specific way?
Well, part of with doing installations, and especially in exhibitions like that, is the way it works is you actually submit a proposal. So at that point, it wasn't created. It was like I basically wanted to splash a whole load of words on the wall, and I'd had different thoughts in the past, but because I'd just recently, a couple of years ago, done the circular pieces for what I called my October Sea Skies, and they had words in them, but they weren't so legible. They were more multi-layered. It was I wanted to bring real strong, clear, sort of punchy words, so that each word could stand on its own. So I proposed that I would ask people the question, that I would collect the words and I would make the pieces, and that I would display it like a wave. But within that, it was also, you have to then almost be quite flexible as to, I didn't know what space I was going to have. Well, when I got there, I got given a space, and it had a big green fire exit sign, which normally, if it was square paintings and your eye was going along straight, that big green sign up in the corner wouldn't have mattered. But because I was splashing it up the wall, it was like that became really it interfered too much. So there had to be quite a bit of juggling to move things around it, so that I got another space. But the way, again, where that space went, if I reversed the wave, it worked. And that's why my Hokusai wave ended up going in the other
I was going to say,
direction.
that exit stage left pursued by tsunami, but if you're putting that underneath an exit, you could feel almost as if the wave was directing you to the exit. That's not what you want to do.
I mean, I'm sure with enough thought and pre-planning, you could have incorporated it. But but it's also, it can be displayed, whereas the previous ones had been in a very clear grid formation. This is very organic, like water, and it can go over a door frame. It can run along the bottom of a skirting board.
That's good. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you some similar questions that I've already asked Kerry. So you've had plenty of time to listen and make up your own responses. But let's talk about artists that influence you. So who are the artists that you found particularly influential in your career?
Well, I remember the first time seeing works by Ian Hamilton Finlay and being, really loving them. And we're hoping to get to the exhibition later this afternoon or tomorrow, because I still haven't seen it at the Modern yet. So he's one that I've really enjoyed his work. More recently, I enjoy the work of Samantha Clark, who builds her paintings with sort of very much organic layers of paint, where the paint gets to move and do its own thing, but then she comes in with very precise drawn lines on top. And in a sense that I'm doing, there's a similarity in that allowing the paint to do different things, but I'm creating the words in a much more specific, precise, controlled manner. So, and then, I love going to art galleries. There's so many, and I'm terrible with names, so I'm just going to leave it at those two.
Okay. So I just delve a little bit more into your development process as well. So you've taken us through the process using books and effectively erasure to come to settle on specific words. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that erasure technique and how that ends up isolating words? Is it random? Is there some really specific way in which you're doing this? And then on top of that, what books are you using?
Good question, Rob.
And as a writer, I'm not advocating. Sorry.
No, I know some people get a little upset. I've had English teacher being quite upset about my instruction. I like to call it altered books of unloved books. So the first book that I did, Collages, which created an erasure poem each day, was a book called Golf for Enlightenment. Yep, an unloved book that when I started it, I wasn't actually planning the erasure poetry, but on the very first page, as I was laying down the collage, words were exposed, and it was too tempting not to keep them. So because I was only using the right-hand side of the page, I would very quickly skim read a very uninteresting book about golf for enlightenment, and I would pick out. I couldn't teach somebody how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to have the page of words, and then there might be one or two words that really interest you that you think, oh, can I work something around this? So thematically, that over those 100 days, basically the poems tended to be about what was happening in the world in the pandemic, what was possibly happening in the weather, because the word shot was in that golf book a lot, so I could make that hot, and it was very good weather during that period of time. What was just my own general thoughts, and I can't remember what the fourth one was, but so they are on my Instagram pages. I haven't got them on my website yet, and I would just sort of like cover them up and completely edit that, strip it down, and I've done it before with some other works where I've also then given everybody in the audience the same page, and so everybody's had a go at it, and it's amazing the different things that people will come up with. Some people will just create a pattern, you can't just physically create a pattern, but I didn't tend to do that. It tended to have some meaning. So that one that had a big painting in the background, that says orange shot across the horizon for a moment. And I don't know what that has to do with golf, but somewhere on that page those words were.
Yeah, maybe they mislaid the golf ball and took a Satsuma instead.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting way of doing things. I hate to think if somebody presented you with an Irving Welsh book, quite what would come out of that. But if you, again, this is an interesting perspective. So, is there any book that you would like to take? So you're using old unloved books.
Uh-huh.
If you were to specifically pick a book or even pick an author, you say, okay, I can delve into that. I can maybe make an erasure poem out of that. That will lead to some more inspiration.
No, absolutely not. Because this book, that's exactly what I did. I was going to be having an exhibition up. Well, I did have an exhibition up in Gairloch Museum, and so I went to the charity shops and I found a book that it was about the Highlands. It was the driest, most difficult book that I almost gave up. In fact, I think I've taped a few pages together because it went on and on and on, and it was like it was never ending. So this one, Hope for a Little Love, it's incalculable. That was done on Valentine's Day, 2021, but most of them were much more difficult. And I started going down to just picking one word from each page. This one says boom, and there'd just been a thunderstorm. So I'm not going to go down that route again of thinking, oh, I'll get a book about something and it's like, I don't think it works. For me, it doesn't work like that. I'm enjoying reading somebody, and I've forgotten her name, but she's on Instagram and she keeps getting letters from the TV license, and they're getting more and more threatening. She doesn't have a TV, and she's making really good erasure poems from her threatening letters.
That's a great way of repurposing something
Well,
that you don't necessarily want to see, isn't it? Yeah, okay. So talk to us a little bit about other forms of art that you like, other forms of making, other forms of creating, whether it's from films, videos, movies, other types of art, music in particular, as I spoke to Kerry about earlier.
Well, Kerry, you're going to be very jealous. When I was 13, I went backstage on an AC/DC concert and got Bon Scott's autograph.
Bon Scott.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, I'm a bit older than you. I like a range of music. My partner's a musician, singer-songwriter, so I get the benefit of a lot of live music, which is great. But when I create work, when I'm in the studio, silence. Can't have the radio on. I could maybe have music, but I can't have singing. I can't have words going on in the background. I know some people, they listen to podcasts and everything. I can't do that.
This is quite interesting. Can we get a show of hands, please? So, everybody in the audience, when you're doing something creative or something that requires concentration, who prefers silence? Just a show of hands, please. So we've got about 4 or 5 there, okay. And who prefers to have a bit of music or background noise? Yeah, I think that's
I prefer
half and
music,
half.
but I can't listen. I started off, I used to listen to podcasts, but I had to give that up because I wasn't listening to them, so the music for me is really in the background, and I find I can still focus completely and often not be aware of what's going on, but yeah.
So you've got a shared love of AC/DC, particularly Bon Scott, and that is rare because he wasn't around that long. What other groups or forms of music? Is it mainly going to be heavy metal, or a broad range of tastes?
Broad range.
Yeah. Who else would you pick out?
You would have picked out, oh my goodness, Natalie Merchant.
Oh yeah, 10,000 Maniacs. Lovely voice, lovely singer. Okay, so just thinking about the media that you use, you mentioned a little bit about that with different forms. Like I think you've got some of the paintings at the back are on aluminium and some are on board. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you choose those particular media or those particular backgrounds to paint onto?
Well, plywood's a common surface. I prefer a hard surface to a soft. Even if I work on canvas, it has to be against something hard. I can't be on a soft canvas. The aluminium, I wanted to try it, and it's a beautiful surface to work on. Yeah, I was really surprised, and did a number of ink paintings on them, which I just didn't realise how well it worked on aluminium.
That's interesting because being ignorant of these things, I would have thought that inks and paints might sort of just quite quickly run off aluminium until they dried.
Yep.
Okay, good. Thinking back to your own career, how you got started, how your career developed, what advice would you give to any, especially as an art educator, what advice would you give to ladies and gentlemen here who may be considering their own art careers?
Yeah, I think I would very much echo Kerry's. I think you've really got to stick at it, but you want to be enjoying it. I didn't have I don't know what would have happened if I'd tried to go to art school from school. It would have been a very different life. And I often wonder if I'd have become a designer. I think I might have ended up going down that route. But there's The Rules by Sister Coretta, who is a screen printing nun from New York, and she has a set of art rules that are very well worth reading, and one of them is about find a place that you trust and get used to it, and then about find teachers or people to inspire you and get as much out of them as possible and turn up and make the work. Just keep turning up, keep turning up.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, that's pretty much a similar answer. I think there's, some of you may have heard of a writer called Malcolm Gladwell, and one of the concepts that he portrays in his books is that if you want to get, I don't know how true this is, but if you want to get good at something, you need at least 10,000 hours of practice, which he uses as a way of explaining why the Beatles got good, because they spent 3 years in Hamburg playing 2 or 3 shows, I think it's 3 years in Hamburg playing 2 or 3 shows a day. So it's practice, learn what attracts you, and practice some more until you get to the point where you're happy to display, show, publish, whatever floats your boat. So those are the questions that I've got for you guys. So, thank you very much for that. Can I open it to the audience initially? Get any questions to Catherine, please?
The circular there, what?
That's on aluminium, and it's mounted on a plywood backing.
Yeah. So you're using acrylic?
That's a mixture of oil paints and graphite, but both pretty much everything sticks on aluminium, really surprisingly. I was amazed by.
Do you have to do anything to the surface to prepare it?
I mean, I buy the aluminium from artists,
Right.
suppliers. So it's not smooth and shiny.
Mm.
There's a grip to it.
You cut the surface.
No, I buy it like that. Yeah, I try lots of things, but cutting aluminium in circles, no.
What backing is it?
Oh, can I show us the
Yeah.
back of it?
Oh, so you've got a wooden.
It's attached onto a wooden frame, and that's just for hanging them.
And that's quite, sorry, if you just show it to the audience and to the camera as well, please. You flip it round and then show the front part of it. Now, the word on there is quite an unusual word.
Yeah.
Can you explain the meaning of that?
Oh yeah. Now the trouble with working with words is you've got to remember what they all mean. It's the sound of water. A hurly gush is, I believe, the sound of water as a river is sort of hitting something.
Mm.
But people give me words. I believe them. It is in the dictionary.
Oh, okay.
But I like the word hurly gush. I think it means what it sounds like.
Yeah.
It's sort of
Oh,
you sort of feel the movement as you hear it.
So onomatopoeic, so it's just literally describing the sound the water makes when it hits rocks and things like that. That's a new one. Learned something today, thank you.
No, these are not varnished. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I just want to take you back, Catherine, to something that you said, and maybe you could chime in here, Kerry, as well. When you were talking about art school, you mentioned that there were certain standards that you were expected to achieve, or standard ways of working you were expected to pass through, such as colours mixing and life drawing. To what extent do you feel that these are a good rite of passage for aspiring artists, or perhaps are they directing people into a more traditional perspective of what art should be? It's a tough one.
I think I did all that as well in the foundation year of my course. Here, I did all sorts of fine art as well as design in the first year, and life drawing was a regular part of it. And I don't think I quite appreciated what it was about until later on in life. And now, although drawing and life drawing is so different to what I do in my paintings, but it's so it's similar in the sense that it's really quite mindful, and I've been to recent life drawing classes, and it's just an amazing, you come out of there and feel amazing after it, because it's this concentrated period of time where you're just focusing, a group of people all silently focusing on drawing, and it's really had such a a profound effect. It's made me realise how drawing can affect your mind state. although I think it is important to introduce people to that, and it's an important tool as well, that observation and becoming quite inward in thinking about your subject.
Yeah, it's a bit like musicians doing scales. I suppose it's just getting that training of observation, sort of training what you see to train your hand to move. But, you know, art education is changing all the time, but I think that fundamental is still there. It shows a commitment as well. It helps people see the commitment. But yeah, I love drawing, you know, watching people, and it's I think with drawing life, with drawing, because nobody will stay still, you know, there's always that bit of movement happening, and it's helping people look at this 3D world that we're in, and, you know, we're creating it then onto a flat surface. So it's just a constant training and helping people understand.
You mentioned staying still. I think fairly recently I read an article, can't remember where, about life models going on strike at a particular gallery or college maybe, because they didn't feel they were being paid as much as the tutors. But one of the points they made is, look, it's actually a skill to be able to stay still for hours on end and keep the same posture.
A friend of mine was doing some, not nude life modelling, but life modelling. She's an artist herself, and she said that she's never been so exhausted. She had no idea how hard it was to be a life model.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask a question now that's probably a little bit unfair, so be nice, please, to each other. So I'd like to start with you, Catherine. If you could tell us what you see in Kerry's work, and then after that, Kerry, if you could tell us what you see in Catherine's work.
Wow, you didn't give us this.
No, he didn't.
In advance. Well, I see beautiful colours in Kerry's work, and I think I'm quite surprised by we've got very similar sort of petrol-y blue going on, and the froth. What you said, you see the texture and the colour and the movement, and they are very evocative.
Well, I was when Leslie mentioned that you were going to, you know, be showing your work here as well. I thought that I hadn't heard of you before, and then actually, especially when I saw your exhibition, I realised that I had seen. You know, I follow you on Instagram. I realised that, but I hadn't quite appreciated how your pieces really complement what I'm thinking of when I'm painting as well. And although I'm not thinking of the words necessarily, it is it's the feeling and the mood, and that's what you're trying to describe in yours as well. But yeah, I definitely see how why you chose them to go together. So yeah, but they're beautiful, and I really like them.
Good, thank you both. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming close to the end now. Thank you for your patience and for your attention. Any further questions to ask? There will be an opportunity after this bit concludes for you to speak to them one-on-one, should you wish. Ladies and gentlemen, just join me please in a round of applause for Catherine Sargeant, Kerry Souter.